politicians and political parties are not going to save us. That we, as Bob Marley said, none but ourselves can free ourselves. And I think we've always, when we were at our best, is when we were collectively organized. We didn't fight against apartheid. We fought for liberation. And that compels us to look at the Sudan, to look at our people that are dominated and just senselessly governed by gang lords and the culture of drug addiction and what it does to us. When freedom compels us to look beyond our waters from the river to the sea and to make common cause as an act of love and solidarity with all people. And at this moment, the awakening, the burgeoning insurrection of Palestine is where the globe is not the Western powers. They're going to come late to the party and they will have exposed their fraudulent nature. But I am greatly enthused and affirmed by the humanity of people from London to Lagos who are really seeing Palestine for what it is.
Father Michael, thank you so much for hosting us here. It's always good to sit with you and to talk. I know that these are like interesting moments. You retiring from here, and also you moving houses, and there's a lot of changes in your life. If I want to just go back a little bit to the beginning, just tell us about who's Father Michael before being Father Michael. Tell us about your upbringing in the street of I believe the area's name is Ellis's River.
Ellis's River,
yeah. Your family, your parents, your siblings.
So my early years was here in Cape Town in the city. I was born in District 6, which is on the lower slopes of Table Mountain. But there were actually 7 districts, and we lived in District 1, which is there by Gallows Hill as a close proximity to the waterfront. And then there's a boulevard that really just goes nowhere. And we were moved out under the pretext that whole area is going to be developed, but it was also group areas. It was.
When was that? Around
people. So we're looking. I was born 57, and when I was about 4 years old, we were moved out. But then we still came to worship at the local Anglican church out in St. John's in Waterkant, which is now very much the business area of the city.
You grew up in a conservative family, would you say?
No. Well, conservative in the sense that there wasn't as an opposite of progressive. It wouldn't be something I could apply to my mom. My parents divorced, so I had a very absent father. And but no, it was a working class community that we were raised in. And the values of that was often informed politically by lack of information. So the church provided much of my cohesion, my getting together, my being part of life. And it was the way, basic teachings about God loves you. But politics would come later to give more depth to that. But I think it was a very happy, we never knew that we were poor, because everybody was poor. You were not competing. But my mom had a very strong religious focus, ensuring that we do not. There was one time when I was about maybe 12 years old when I said, I'm tired of being poor. And
that was you thought.
I was saying to my mother, and she looked at me and said, since when are you poor? And then she said, "Did you have something to eat before you said that? Don't you wear shoes to school?" Now, we were the only ones, one of the few kids in our neighborhood who school outside. And we wore shoes to school, but as soon as you came back, you had to take it off, get back on the street feet. And, there was never, there was a lot of caring and sharing in the community, particularly when you didn't have to say you needed food, or you didn't have to say, "I need a loaf of bread," because of the intimacy of the family life on the street and so forth. People understood when to give and when to accept and how to share. That you don't obligate the recipient, and the giver is never bullied emotionally or in other ways being blackmailed to do the right thing. So conservative as in caring, conservative as holding together, it was very, very enriching experience for me.
On that, Father, how was your relationship with your siblings? And also your upbringing and your mom's presence. How did that shape your ideas towards the apartheid time and the struggle and fighting for justice?
It's a very interesting question. I've never been actually asked, what is your relationship with your siblings? I'm the eldest, right? And the brother that was younger than me, was only a year separating us. And then our baby brother, the youngest son.
The spoiled one, hey? Generally, that's the case.
There's a photo of the three of us, and John must have been about 3 years old, and Bonita, my wife, says, that one looks like he knows he's cute. And then we have a sister, our favorite, Denise. Even now, she's a Caucasian. My brother Mark has died, but she has got much of my mom's kind of caring, tenderness, and a great sense of humor. But the relationship between myself and them was regulated by the absent father. And when I turned 12, my mom called us all together and she said to my siblings, "You're not to call him Michael anymore. You call him brother," which is, in our culture, Buddha. And when I called him to come off the streets or to start the fire for cooking, whatever, that was Buddha, or brother. And so there was also a conservatism that crept into me. I was a bit more serious, and I carried the responsibility of making sure that nobody's on the street after sunset.
Was it scary to have this responsibility at this age?
It was my mother's intuitive sense that we needed some surrogate while she's traveling from work, somebody to have some law and order. And I, of course, took it very seriously. And I internalized that authority, which then put some distance between myself and my siblings, except the relationship with the youngest one, Denise. We ended up having similar views of society, how to change things. And she didn't grow up in my shadow politically. I went to the Eastern Cape, to seminary in 1981, which was a time of our own awakening, detention, and as an activist in our community.
How can you put me through, how did you start activism? I know that many people, they don't know that they're activists until they are activists. And where did you serving in different churches and in the Western Cape fit significant moment challenges that you had, especially with the communities and the apartheid?
So, being raised in the church, right? And until about the age of 15, all the clergy that came to our community, to our congregation, the Anglicans were English speaking. We had a lovely Irishman, Father Fred Marks, and another priest, Father John Hillman, also from England. And so I think the whole idea was to stay out of trouble.
Sorry,
And
what does that mean?
that means that politics is going to get into trouble. It was never overtly stated that way. I remember I went to apply for a bursary at one school where I did my matric, and my mom went with. And the principal asked, this is now, we're looking at about 1973. Principal asked, why would you want to send Michael to the school? So my mom said, to be a respectable citizen. You know, we don't even have a vote. I knew we didn't have a vote. How can I be a citizen? But my mom's understanding of decency was very much shaped by the ethos of the Anglican Church. We spoke English, we were middle class, and if not middle class, aspiring middle class. If not in terms of where we were in the economy, but in terms of the values that was espoused.
Well, where did your wife fit in this picture? How did you guys meet? And
Much later.
and how, did you? I believe that you guys kind of participated in the struggle in a way or another together.
I suppose she recruited me in many ways. No, seriously, in that in 1980, I was working as a youth worker in the Anglican Church. It was a very lovely priest there, Father Peter, and he employed me to work with young people in the community, not in the church, but because the school boycott has also resulted in absent tourism and little street gangs being formed, and he employed me to work within that constituency. And I've been, the year before, 1979, I've been part of a program in the church called Give a Year of Your Life, where you agreed that you would stop all formal employment and you would go for training and how to organize young people, work in communities. And as somebody who had no politics or clear direction, I was suddenly overwhelmed with all the information about Marxism on the one day. Somebody comes and talks about Black consciousness, and another body on liberation theology as it was coming from Latin America. And then also how to organize in the community. There was a book by a fellow called Saul Zelinsky, Rules for Radicals, and he was organizing in Chicago. So suddenly I had all that information before I knew nothing. And coming home back to Cape Town, it was in KwaZulu-Natal. So I would meet people there, young men and women from Lamontville, from Orlando, west in Johannesburg, in Soweto, all over. It was really an unusual gathering of Black and white young people at that time. And I was there from January to April. And I came back to Cape Town and there was no work for me. So the church that had conscripted me in abandoning formal employment, and I was the only breadwinner in the family. Mom had just lost her job. My mom said, if that is what you believe God is calling into, you have my blessing. And this church that appealed to my faith and to test it, couldn't find work for me. And it was devastating because it was an act of betrayal. And it was only months later I found out it was the political content of my training course. I didn't come away singing, Jesus loves you, this I know, or Jesus wants you with a sunbeam. I came singing soft freedom songs and Zenina and We Shall Overcome. But it was still very different from what we had been shaped into believing. And I think that betrayal sharpened my anger. It was growing, it was latent, but my first direct act of investing from a faith basis in calling by the very church. I didn't have the words or the life experience to say what I'm saying now, that it was betrayal. I just felt very just rejected by the faith institution. And then there was another grouping that offered me a job, young Christian students. It was based in the Catholic Church. Our national chaplain was Father Albert Nolan, Dominican priest, who wrote a stunning book called Jesus Before Christianity. And it's a great book to be reading even now in terms of what's happening in the Holy Land. And it was in being based through YCS, and they had a very clear analytical model that you see, you look at what's wrong, you judge, you analyze, you evaluate, and then you act. You embark on an action, and then you come back and review. So that's a dialectic, that circle that's put in place. And I think that was my sharpest awakening.
Father, from there, where did Archbishop Desmond Tutu fit in this picture?
But you still ask me how I met Bonita.
Yes.
So it was in 1980, the year after I had gone to KwaZulu-Natal, to Bottasfield, in this National Youth Leadership Training Program, a ecumenical program, but under the funding auspices of the Methodist Church. And I was in the youth of our church, and there was a fellow by the name of Willie who was dating a woman somewhere, and he gave me a letter because he's working. I'm got more leisure time, and I had my bicycle, and I cycled to this address, and I knocked on the door, and at that time I just had a size 28 bicycle, a fisherman's haversack with water and a diary that was empty and a pen. That was everything. And I was busy tying the bicycle around the tar pole outside the house. And then I had this giggle, and I turned around, and this woman was laughing at me. And
why was she laughing?
I think I just looked stupid, trying to secure a bicycle that nobody's going to steal. But I had this fan, but it was my, Bob Marley, it's my only transport. My wheels are my only carriage. And she was at UCT. And she came home one day back to Mitchell's Plain with this document, and she said she went to a section of the library where it was banned literature, and she punched in the words freedom and Africa. And every time comes up this document, and she had it printed and brought copies, and that was the first time I ever saw the Freedom Charter. So I always tease her and say, you recruited me onto the path of revolution.
So you would say it was like a love from the first sight?
Oh, yeah. She's beautiful then, beautiful now. No. God said, I'm going to give this boy a gift, give him love in the most wonderful way.
From their father, where does Archbishop Desmond Tutu fits in the picture? Is he your role model, would you say, or you have others?
I was ordained to what we call the diaconate. It's a year that you serve before you become a priest. You call it deacon. And I was ordained here on the 16th of December, 1984, in this very cathedral. And Archbishop Desmond wasn't the Archbishop. And then...
Who was that? Who was it?
It was a lovely fellow by the name of Philip Russell. But I think he was the kind of caretaker because plans were afoot to make sure that we have our first black Archbishop. And Desmond Tutu was a front runner in that. And when we met him, my generation was so excited. We wanted to, in our innocence, we were all, mid-20s, and we were asked to see him. And the outcome of that, he berated us and said, the fact that I'm even meeting you. It's an act of generosity on his part. And at that time, we were all information. And we were under the authority of a senior priest called a rector. And so somehow it had been miscommunicated to him that we were coming to complain about our rectors. And then one of our number, Terence Lester, said, but that is not why we are here. And he gave Father Desmond the broader context that we were so excited and we were part of the election of him as our Archbishop. How can we do the right thing to be consistent with what he's teaching and preaching? And I think when Terence had contextualized it like that, the old man listened a bit more. But look, he was an archbishop. He had his authority. He also had to work with the broad terrain of these young radical upstarts. How does he work with the clergy, the generation of clergy that were older, that were his key advisors and so on? So it's only when he got to know us a bit better. And the Desmond Tutu in office with all the regalia and the power of a very, still managed to hold the essence of being an archbishop. That he personified what Pope Francis a few years ago said, that the shepherd must smell of the sheep. And he can only do that by close proximity to the people. And he led from the front. He exercised a kind of leadership that he consulted God and then informed us, and he informed the United Democratic Front, so wanted to caucus. He said, I got my mandate from God. They were looking for the mandate from the people. But you needed that, that courageous individualism that is so contoured by a sense of community. And there was a good example of spirituality for my generation, that everything begins and ends with prayer. And if anything that we can take away from that man is that he took God very seriously, and also took very seriously what he believed God was leading him to do. And the testing of that, who gains from it, to whose advantage is it, and who is not at the table of inclusion, and how do we go about securing the ones who are at a distance at the periphery. And it is in some ways his life personified what Chris Hani before 94 was asked. How would you gauge the value of the new South Africa? And he said, it's when we are able to see how far the poor have moved from the periphery into the center of society.
Father, do you take God very seriously as well? I mean, you said he did.
I have a conviction that God takes me serious. In the sense also, I believe in God's sense of humor. For me to end up in this cathedral as the 15th dean, from somebody who was in the liberation movement in all the ways that one can be, and to find this here, I think God, I always said, when I was interviewed by a journalist, I said, I think God wanted me to achieve two things. The first one, he said, I want to make this fellow pray more. And this has actually made me, when you pray, when you don't have any more words, or when you pray, you don't know more what to do, or you just feel so defeated. That is a magnificent point of prayer, to bow your the knee of your heart to that. And then the other thing is God said, I want Michael to love white people. And it's not that I never loved white people, but I had only really interacted with comrades who were white, whose comradeship, solidarity, and friendship I will never say I was colorblind, but the class and the race didn't become defining ways of responding to them because we were in the family of struggle. But coming here was meeting the full spectrum of whiteness, white as entitled, white as in bourgeois, white as in ordinary people, just trying to find their way through life. And I had to experience and be loved and to, when you're visiting somebody and they're very ill, they may be having an operation or they're dying. It's just you and their breath.
Is this why you were like exceptionally involved in vigils and events and ceremonies? You hosted Interfaith, and we spoke before recording here about your experiences with Interfaith, how sometimes it was difficult, sometimes it was easy. And also you hosted like very controversial figures from Hamas to other people. How did that work?
I think if you look at our genealogy, as in Cape Town, we call this place Kamisa, which is a creolized word coming from our Khoi and San ancestors, and it's called Kamisa, a place of sweet waters. But if we look at, our ancestry, it is African, it is Asian, and there is also European. And I think when you are everything of the above, in its essence, in its confluence, but it doesn't define you because you are a newness of that synergy. It also alerts you to the nature of difference, that difference can't be absolute because the difference is then resolved in you. So I think for us in Cape Town, in Kamisa, I think we have an intuitive sense. Even, when I hear the Atan call to prayer, I'm at home. Wherever I am, I was in Bethlehem 2 days before Christmas, and I'm hearing the call to prayer. It wasn't the church bells that I heard, it was a call to prayer. And to awake with that. I've got no intention of reverting to Islam, but Islam in so many ways, not just socially, but also spiritually, is part of me in the way that Hinduism is part of my own formation because I lived in an Indian classified area called Cravenby Estate. And my first experience of faith were the Chetty family were Hindu, but would go to Holy Trinity Catholic Church, and they would have a little statue of Mother Mary in their garden, and they will burn incense sticks, and they will place fruit there, which my brother Mark and I, on one happy day, we decided, the birds will eat the fruit, so maybe we can also share in what the birds will be eating. But it was just, the difference can never be absolute. The difference always initiates a curiosity. Why do you eat that way? Why do you pray this way? What are you doing? Why is your name Aziz? And so on. I always ask people, what does your name mean? So I think it's not, if we are exceptional, it is that we, by the 19th century, the whole world was in our DNA.
Father, on this, religious people are known of, moving around the words and using these kind of terminology. But if you want to speak like frankly, you here in the cathedral, how do you think that you affected people and community? You spoke a lot about Palestine. You visited Palestine. You hosted people here related to Palestine in just like plain words. How did that work?
When I was just here around about May, June, I was preaching, and then I was saying something, and I said, Alhamdulillah. And there was somebody in the congregation, we're fatih. I can't take it, And that got back to me, which I really enjoyed because It was something that was being very honest. And what, to use the previous example of Archbishop Desmond, is that you need to lead from the front. If you have an inkling of an intuitive sense, you got to do something. And so when the events of October 7th, the Hamas-led onslaught, two things happened. Just a week before that, the Synod of the Anglicans, like our parliament, came out with a resolution that Israel is an apartheid state, and then this is there, and then Hamas intervention and the backlash, the declared war immediately with vociferous energy results in what is now Gaza. And by that time, by Monday, we have had a statement from our Archbishop to say that, and by Archbishop Joshua, Bishop Joshua of our diocese, we call for this vigil every Wednesday from 1 o'clock till 1:45, and they will gather here just to review and hold space, as I learned in that term in this gathering. So there was a lot of hesitancy, a lot of silence, because I'm speaking into this congregation. And then the second Sunday, the same thing. And the third Sunday, I preached. And I said, I have the Dean of Kimberley, Reggie Liu, who had asked for a kafia. And I only had my own kafia, which I'd bought in Bethlehem in 2017. My wife and I had been there on a pilgrimage. And I sent that to him. And he sent me a photo of himself in the pulpit wearing the kafia. And I said to my congregation, I said to Reg, you are more brave than I'll ever be. And as I said that in my sermon, I'm also talking to myself, and I said to the congregation, why must I be scared of you? You're my congregation. And with that opening of myself to all what vulnerability is, I spoke from the heart. And when I finished, there was an applause. It wasn't like a standing ovation, but that also people were grappling with the same issues at school, at workplace. Christian Zionists were attacking them. And so I stepped into the trenches with them, and we came alongside. And incrementally, we are now where we are, where you can see in front of our pulpit a prayer shawl that the rabbi from the shul in the gardens gave me, and then kafia that somebody left here, and I put it there to emphasize that we are of the Abrahamic faith. What does it mean to have a father, an ancestral father in Abraham? So it's also compelling us to revisit stories and the way we understood the Bible.
Have you faced any clashes, issues, like experience after you hosted, it came after the 7th of October, Hamas's delegation here?
So that was on the 29th of November, International Day of Solidarity with Palestine, and I had resolved that I would go on a fast, and I would finish the fast. I would start on the 29th, symbolically. The Bishop Joshua would inaugurate my fast, and he will anoint me and pray for me. And a fellow by the name of Dr. Yusuf Chikti sent me about 20 past 11, there are two representatives of Hamas. I didn't know how to respond to it because it's National Day of Solidarity. I've got other things to worry about in terms of my congregation and pastoral care, that whoever comes, I'm not going to be thinking about it. But when we stepped onto the steps here outside the cathedral under the trees there were far amount of people than we've ever seen.
You didn't expect that?
No. And it was very Arabic. It was now
very Arabic? What do you mean?
In the slogans and very pro-Hamas. There were young people wearing Hamas headbands. And I remember from our own struggle, Suddenly everyone is in controversies, but they've never even seen what a bullet looks like, but they're suddenly now militants. And I saw that posturing from these young people. But there was also a moment of regret for me in that gathering, because over the weeks, we had white women who I would go to and ask, what organization are you from? They said, no, we just work in the offices. And we just wanted to come stand quietly. They didn't want to stand in front. They're standing, but they were tentatively stepping up. And I knew in my heart at that moment, we've lost it. You know, and it was a sad moment, because it is always marching forward and bringing people with you. You know, they don't have to be freedom fighters. They just have to love freedom and fall in love with people who are not free. And I think that was for me not a good moment. But at the same time, Bishop Josh and I were standing, and suddenly we heard these Hamas slogans and very anti-Semitic comments also coming from certain sectors of the crowd. And I said to Bishop Joshua, but we've been here before. And he agreed with me, because we reminded each other there were times when we were marching as clergy, and then suddenly, out of the blue, someone would shout, one settler, one bullet, which was not our aspiration. But we were there. That's part of being in a freedom struggle.
Father, I had a question about Jesus, Marxism, and jazz. But now you mentioned it, and we spoke about it before we start shooting. Do you think that everyone deserves mercy? Even like, I'm asking, comparing to South Africa and Palestine, people who are, committed like mass genocides and all of that. Is it our role to? I remember we spoke about this. Is it our role to help and support the resistance that take them to God faster, or is it our role to forgive them ourselves? How do you deal with these questions yourself?
Look, there is a Christian position about forgiveness that that we are the recipients of a loving God, and when it comes to judgment, it's God's decision. At the same time, if I look at my personal life, the awful things that have been lied about me, said about me, done unto me by people who love God. I'm talking about that early time when I gave my youthful innocence to the church and was betrayed. I'm grateful for that, because of how that experience compelled me to look inside of me. Our grandparents used to have a saying, don't look to the heavens, look inside. And that enabled me to find a recourse in my ability to say, whatever these people are doing is not the conclusive nature of the church leadership or individuals in my own congregation who are very hateful. And there's nothing that I can do except heap burning coal of kindness. If I know what we call a skinnerbeck, I know that you're a person that just don't wish me well.
What does this word mean?
A gossip. A gossip, but with malign. There's always there's nice ways of being holy gossip, but there's also based on lies and evil conjecture. And to know that such a hater is on my company gives me great pleasure to offer them a cup of tea and to chat. Knowing that in some cases, they'll think of it as a strategy, but for me, it's a strategy of my own self-care, that I'm not overwhelmed by their darkness. But at the same time, one would bridge no quarter from their side to say, these things are absolute. I'm not going to hate you, but I'm not going to allow you to continue with that.
Father, you mentioned I was reading before the interview. I was reading. You mentioned jazz a lot in your life. Can you speak to us about it?
No, jazz.
Especially Cape Town, the city of.
No, it's a global thing. We got our own kind of Kabzela thing on that. But in terms of jazz, when I was working for government in a department called Colored Affairs here in Roland Street. And that was 1978. And there's a fellow, John Steenkamp, John Estesen, lived in Grassy Park. He was a student, social work student at the University of the Western Cape. He had got a government bursary, so during the school holidays, he used to come work at Colored Affairs. And I befriended him, and then he invited me to come spend the weekend with him and his family, which I happily did. And it turns out he was an assistant DJ for a guy called Eli's Coming, and Eli's Coming was a progressive DJ and in a place called Jolly Cop. And so I would carry the speaker box and I would sit and watch and listen to the music. And then I remember one distinctive, definitive moment was after this performance about 2:00, ending up in front of a place called Cozy Corner. And I'm waiting on our Salomis, and there's a song playing, Lady Wants to Know, Michael Franks. It's soft jazz, but the whole backup, Wilton, Joe Sample, and others. And I think that started reframing. The neurons in your body started taking a different understanding, and that rewiring, I think, made me a lot more susceptible to looking at old values, being challenged, stirring of, falling in love with life. And when you fall in love with life, you love everything and the most vulnerable. And it's not just the sentimental, it is really the revolutionary in the way that's in the customs of North Africa. African says that, that freedom has got two beautiful children, anger at the way things are, and courage to ensure it don't remain the same. And jazz helped me, nudge me along the path, along with Marxism, because all the teachings that I received from wonderful priests, one who was really instrumental into me taking a decision to consider becoming a priest myself, all the sermons about God loves you, despite Marx's comments about religion being the opiate of the people, and he's right, He calls it the sigh of the oppressed, and he's right. But he's wrong in the way religion made me feel. He didn't know my mom. He didn't go to the aunties in the church that nurtured me. I come from a strong, womanist, faith-based tradition that, again, it's our Creole background, the way that we can make magic out of food. We can take spices and make it into a feast of the most meager things. That has enabled me to be a bit more alive. And there's always music, There's always music. There's one of our great poets, Richard Reeves, says, there's no black, there's no white music. There's always music at the end of the rainbow.
Father, how do you want to spend your retirement days?
Sleeping.
Are you? I believe you told me you wanted to leave a legacy here behind you. How is that gonna balance? Are you gonna try to come to the church more often, this church, and try to do some work, or you're focusing on family now?
I think legacy is it's a clumsy word.
It's a fancy word that
for the ego. I have an ego. I love to be admired and respected. And if I had more time, I would have shaved for this interview, but I don't.
You look handsome as it is.
Thank you. But having said that, having this Desmond Tutu window under my watch. And in our tradition, you're only as strong as your team. And I have a great group of men and women. I've had a shortage of clergy here. a cathedral needs about 4 people. Since COVID, we've not really been able to get more than 1 person. We had, I think, 2 clergy died from COVID, and with a small cohort of clergy, that has a strong impact on our ability to be functional. Also, you need a particular skill set when you come to the cathedral, somebody that has some liturgical and musical background, and the other one just to be the pastor, and the other one to look after the admin, and then you have the dean having a metropolitical position. But in the absence of that, and having to look beyond priests, I also learned another way of being the church. And so all that we've achieved in terms of the demographic, of make it more diverse, that slowly happened under my watch. But the thing about leadership is also, because I always noticed that things that I always wanted, like at one church, I wanted the band, and we could never get it together. And when I was gone, the band came.
We can hear there's a band outside.
It's on Government Avenue. But I think in terms of coming back, I love the cathedral. I would want to occasionally worship here. But on Sunday, we had a lovely fusion of African Kosa voices raised in song, and just filling the acoustics of this cathedral is meant for unamplified voices. And to hear a soprano and baritone, and just a musical, liturgical seduction of that, of spirit. I want to experience more of that. And also, as God allows and leads me, to be of there where I can be engaging with young people.
Father, any final thoughts, confessions, secrets that you would like to reveal? Any last word of encouragement?
No, we're a few weeks away from our election. And it's very much becoming more preeminent, and the politicians are so humble and so willing to listen. And it's always important for us to remind ourselves that politicians and political parties are not going to save us. That we, as Bob Marley said, none but ourselves can free ourselves. And I think we've always, when we were at our best, is when we were collectively organized. And somebody recently told me that we didn't fight against apartheid. We fought for liberation. And that compels us to look at the Sudan, to look at our people that are dominated and just senselessly governed by gang lords, and the culture of drug addiction and what it does to us. And when freedom compels us to look beyond our waters from the river to the sea, and to make common cause as an act of love and solidarity with all people. And at this moment, the awakening, the burgeoning insurrection of Palestine is where the globe is not the Western powers. They're going to come late to the party, and they will have exposed their fraudulent nature. But I am greatly enthused and affirmed by the humanity of people from London to Lagos who are really seeing Palestine for what it is.
Father,
occupied territory.
Father, thanks a lot for this interesting, beautiful talk and discussion. Wish you all the best. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody who's watching.